Donald Trump has been indicted on January 6 charges. We've got the full 45-page indictment that we are going to go through in detail and see what some of the reaction is from guys like Peter Strzok, formerly with the FBI. But Trump posted this on True Social, alerting everybody to this fact. Says, I hear that deranged Jack Smith, in order to interfere with the presidential election of 2024, will be putting out yet another fake indictment of your favorite president, me, Trump, at 5 p.m. Why didn't they do this 2.5 years ago? Why did they wait so long? Because they wanted to put it right in the middle of my campaign. Prosecutorial misconduct. And so at about 5 o'clock, a little after, the indictment has been dropped. And we can see exactly what we expected coming out of the District of Columbia, filed August 1st. We know that this dropped on a Tuesday, which is when the grand jury convened. It is 45 pages, United States of America versus Donald Trump. Now, right out of the gate here, we see that there are 4 charges: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Now, it's very curious here. We've covered a lot of other January 6 cases, and one of the more serious charges was seditious conspiracy. In fact, Proud Boys are going to prison for that. So are the Oath Keepers. And many of them pointed to Donald Trump as the person who orchestrated the whole thing. And so if they're going to be going to prison like Stewart Rhodes for 18 years for seditious conspiracy, and they say Trump was this master architect who was insurrecting the whole country through his dangerous words of fight like hell, or whatever he said, which was inconsequential compared to what the Democrats said, how can they not charge him with that? It's like they charged him with lesser things than the other defendants. But I thought he was the head honcho. He was like the mob boss, they kept telling. So right out of the gates, I don't see insurrection on here. I see a conspiracy to obstruct. So you're thinking about the obstruction, and then you do the actual obstruction of, and then an attempt. So it's a conspiracy, you thought about it, then you attempted to do it, then you actually did the obstruction. Okay, so we've got like 3 different layers on there. It's like the same crime, just kind of permutated. All right. And then it's a conspiracy against rights and a conspiracy to defraud the United States. Okay, that's it. They've been screaming about this for this long length of time, and we don't even have seditious conspiracy in here. Oh, God. All right, let's see. They tell us that the defendant, Donald Trump, was the 45th president of the United States, and he was a candidate for re-election. Trump lost the presidential election, which you guys say. Now, despite having lost, Trump was determined to remain in power. Oh, wow, this is going to be like a DOJ thriller novel. Get ready for the worst. So for more than 2 months following Election Day on November 3rd, Trump spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew they were false, and he knew. And that's going to be the subject of a lot of debate, because we've been hearing the news agencies like CNN, MSNBC, all debate this point. That's why they get hysterical every time a new witness comes in, because they say, oh, it's Rudy Giuliani. Oh, it's Sidney Powell. Oh, it's somebody's got inside knowledge. Maybe they're going to be that key witness that tells us this fact. Trump knew. Now, they're going to have to prove this, right? We're just starting at this indictment, but that's a bold claim. So they better have some evidence to back that up as we get through the rest of this thing. But they say Trump repeated and widely disseminated these lies anyway, to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger. Yeah, Trump did that. And erode public faith in the administration of the election. All Trump's fault. It wasn't like you guys tried to rig 2016 and then impeached him on a fake hoax that caused us to distrust, and your COVID policies and all of the election changes. Of course, there was an atmosphere of mistrust. You guys were censoring us at the DOJ all throughout 2020 and eroded public faith in the administration of the election. That was not Trump's fault. That was their fault. But this is them right. Trump had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election. All right. So they say he can say that. I would agree. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, like seeking recounts, audits of popular votes, which he did. In many cases, he did pursue these methods of contesting the election results, and we covered a lot of them here. His efforts to change the outcome in any state were uniformly unsuccessful. We know that, and we also know that there was many dismissals based on standing. We know that there were, in my humble opinion, many different egregious violations of the electoral law because the executive branch was colluding with the courts, secretaries of state, and the judges were exploiting the COVID laws to change the election rule in violation of the legislative power which governs that procedure in our country. So Jack Smith writes, he says, shortly after Election Day, Trump also pursued unlawful means, all right, let's see, of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election result. In doing so, Trump perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. Ooh. One is a conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, or defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified in violation of the U.S. law. Okay, let's see. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede J6 congressional proceedings at which the results were counted and certified, and a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. So he tried to defeat the lawful federal government function. Let's see where this goes. Jack Smith says, each of these conspiracies, which was built on the widespread mistrust that Trump was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, certifying the results of an election, which was grotesquely problematic in 2020. They say count one, the conspiracy. From November 14th, the election day, all the way till January 20th, 2021. So it's a broad scope here. From the election date, was that the date of the election? No, it was Tuesday, November 3rd. So Tuesday, November 3rd was the election date. So it didn't actually start there. The conspiracy developed after that. Between that length of time, Trump did knowingly, they say, and this is the mental state, okay, the mindset. What did Trump have going on in his mind? Was he acting recklessly? Was he acting negligently? Was he acting intentionally? Right? Sometimes you wake up and you just go intend to do the thing. Sometimes you don't want the thing to happen, but you kind of should have known the thing was going to happen, and therefore you were acting recklessly. They say knowingly. So, and this was, we spent a lot of time on this, the mens rea, the mindset. Did Trump knowingly, they say he did, conspire, confederate, he agreed with co-conspirators, meaning there's other people very likely to be charged here, to defraud the United States, that he used dishonesty, fraud, and deceit. The purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the presidential election. Here we go. By knowingly using false claims of election fraud to obstruct the government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. Let's see what that evidence is. Right? That's a tall standard. Knowingly is Trump saying, I know I lost the election. I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways. Previously here, we've talked about a different standard, which I still think will get them to knowingly, which is a version of knowingly. It's recklessness. If you know that your conduct is so reckless that it's going to cause the thing, you can kind of say that you knew the thing was going to happen. Trump was acting recklessly in disregarding all of his advisors. My argument was they could still fit that into the knowingly standard, which would make it criminal. As it reads now, it feels like he's just saying, like Trump's, yeah, I know I lost, but I don't care. We're stealing it anyway. That's a tall order to prove. The defendant's co-conspirators are listed here. Among these were, we got some other people who might be charged. 6 co-conspirators. 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the 2020 election campaign attorneys would not. So who's this attorney? We don't know. A co-conspirator is another attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role in overseeing the certification. So another lawyer. You've got a bunch of names that could be in here. An attorney is co-conspirator 3, another lawyer whose unfounded claims of election fraud Trump privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. So maybe that's Trump knowing. That theory's nuts. Nonetheless, Trump embraced and publicly amplified that person. Another one is a Justice Department official, co-conspirator 4, who worked on civil matters and who Trump attempted to use the DOJ to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. And co-conspirator 5 is another lawyer who assisted in devising and attempting to implement a plan to submit fraudulent states of electors to obstruct the certification proceeding, and co-conspirator 6, who's a political consultant who helped to implement a plan to submit what they call fraudulent slates of electors. We call them alternative slates of electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. Now, I got to point out on this one, look at all these lawyers here. Wow. All these lawyers, just like we came to the same conclusion here. You can have bad legal theories and you can push them forward and you can fight them to the end of the world. My defense is my client wasn't even driving the car. Yeah, that's my defense. That's my theory. He wasn't even driving the car. Can you prove it? Well, I don't know that he did. I don't know that he didn't. That's our defense. That's our theory of the case. We're allowed to make our argument. You can cross-examine our evidence and make your case. But we don't get charged with crimes for that, for using the strategies of our case. We live in an adversarial system. We're supposed to push our arguments as far as possible. And we have a bunch of lawyers who are licensed attorneys who are all looking at these plans and strategies. We got 5 of them. And a Department of Justice official. Okay, 5 out of 6 are in the legal space, and number 6 is a political consultant. So 4 lawyers plus a DOJ official, they all say, yeah, I mean, this sounds pretty good. We're allowed to have alternative slates of electors. If Mike Pence does reject the votes at the outset of this count, then we want this to go back to the state legislatures so that we can see them and we can review what happened and propose our alternative slates of electors back into the count. It's all contingency planning, which until recently, until this psychotic government has gotten a hold of the DOJ, was a normal thing. I guarantee you, Democrats have contingency plans in all of their elections. They've got lawyers who are filing contingency plan lawsuits before the elections even happen. So this is all normal stuff. And look, it's just lawyer, political consultant, DOJ official. But all of these people are now criminals because they proposed an alternative theory. And this is going to be very curious. I mean, you're going to have a bunch of lawyers. I don't know if these guys are going to join. I don't know if they're going to be charged. I don't know if they've already cut deals or what is going to happen with them. But you could just imagine the trial. You just put every attorney up. No, I thought it was legitimate. Put another lawyer up. You're an attorney, right? You've practiced for a long time. Yeah. You've got a license, right? You've, how many cases have you handled? How many courts have you been in? Okay. And you thought it was legitimate? Why? Well, here's why. Okay. How about another one? How about another one? It's like if a doctor is going to be charged with negligence because he did something wrong, and you got 5 other doctors who all sit there and say, no, I think that's about right. I think that's what I would have done, and it's legitimate. And that doctor shouldn't be in trouble because he was exercising the same standard of care as the other doctors were. Same type of situation here. Now, Jack Smith just says, well, I disagree with all of their opinions. I'm going to substitute my version of what they should have done for theirs. And it's a substituting of a legal conclusion. That's all. But they're charging them with crimes and calling them co-conspirators now for representing Donald Trump. It's insane. They tell us that the federal government function here, the federal government function or dysfunction by which the results for the presidential election are collected was established through the Electoral Count Act, federal act passed 1887, which was highly problematic as they have modified it. The Constitution provided that individuals called electors to select the president. Each state determined how its electors apportioned. Through state laws, each of the 50 states chose to select their electors based on a popular vote in the state. Then they determine how they come up with the vote. Then on a date set by the act, each state's ascertained electors are required to meet and collect the votes. Then the Constitution requires on the 6th of January following Election Day, Congress meets in a joint session for certification presided over by the VP to count the votes, resolve any objections, and announce the result, thus certifying the winner. Federal government function from the point of ascertainment to certification is foundational to the United States, has operated in a peaceful and orderly manner for more than 130 years. So before that, it was a problem. We had another problem with that, right, for 130 years. And then did they forget the part where it talks about resolve any objections? I mean, we're supposed to have objections. We did. We had Ted Cruz who wanted to go into special session, and there was a possibility, as he's acknowledging, that this process occurs. And Mike Pence theoretically could have said, I don't think these are legitimate electoral count votes because there were massive problems in whatever state. And at that moment in time, all of those contingency plans could have come into effect. But he's just saying you're not allowed to do that. Now, manner and means, they say, Trump and his conspiracy to impair the federal government occurred through the following method. Trump and his co-conspirators used false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert election results. They made baseless fraud claims. Are we going to litigate that? I mean, is that what this case is going to be about? Whether there was actual fraud or not? And I would argue that there was fraud in the legal provision of what the judges did and what the secretaries of state did. This is a broad, right? This is very broad. Can Trump make any argument that there was any amount of fraud? Trump pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, to disenfranchise millions of voters, or to enfranchise them, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of voting to go in favor of Trump. And to do that, he organized fraudulent slates of electors in 7 states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, which is already prosecuting their slates of electors, which means Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, probably also on the hook, because not only are the feds prosecuting their political enemies, we also have the state government attempting to mimic the procedure. This included causing fraudulent electors to meet on the day to cast their votes. They said that they were legitimate electors, but they call them fraudulent. We call them alternative. We've already known all of this, and they're prosecuting those people too. So Trump and co-conspirators attempted to use the power of the authority of the DOJ, attempted to conduct sham election crime investigations, and to send a letter to target states, don't know if that happened or not, saying that they had identified significant concerns, using the DOJ's authority as cover to convene the opportunity to give them cover to create fraudulent electors. They say Trump and his co-conspirators also tried to get Vice President Pence to use his ceremonial role, which is interesting because they've really tightened that up since then. They say that he was encouraged to use knowingly false claims of election fraud to get him to send legitimate votes back to the state legislatures for review, which I think would have been perfectly legitimate and constitutional. And at that point, the state legislatures would have then said, well, we do think that this was a fraudulent problem based on our investigation, and we are going to, because we have the power of the legislative Constitution gives them the authority to regulate the elections, they're just going to declare it and propose their alternative elector. But when that failed, Trump and his co-conspirators repeated false claims of election fraud to the gathered supporters. And they told them that Pence had the authority and directed them to the Capitol to obstruct the certification proceeding. That's a pretty bold claim too. They're saying Trump directed them to obstruct the certification. Is that accurate? I thought he said march peacefully and patriotically down to exert pressure on the vice president. And after it became public on January 6th that Pence would not fraudulently, they say, alter the election result, a large and angry crowd, including many individuals whom Trump had deceived into believing that he could do that, violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceedings. Trump and his co-conspirators exploited the disruption by continuing to levy false claims of election fraud and convinced those members to further delay the vote. This is what we've got in this indictment. We know all of this. Defendants' knowledge of the falsity of his election claim. They say that Trump and his co-conspirators made knowingly false claims that there had been fraud. These lies were prolific. Dozens of false claims saying that there were large numbers of dead people, non-residents, non-citizens, ineligible voters. These claims were false. And Trump knew they were false. In fact, Trump was notified repeatedly that his claims were untrue, often by people on whom he relied for candid advice or who were best positioned to know the fact, and he deliberately disregarded the truth. Did you see how that language shifted a little bit? Let's just rewind on that. These claims were false. They say Trump knew, that he absolutely knew, which to me means that he accepted their beliefs and readily acknowledged the election had been lost. But that changes a little bit. They say he knew. Why? Because he was notified repeatedly. Well, that's okay. You can be notified all the time that the claims were untrue, and he might be notified by other people who told him differently. So how do they get inside his mind? Is that the evidence that they've got? Other people notified him? Doesn't matter. All of us get notified all the time about stuff that we don't care about or believe at all, often by the people on whom he relied and who were best positioned to know the facts, and he deliberately disregarded the truth. No, he disregarded their opinion. He's entitled to have a different opinion. In fact, that's what being the president is all about. They say that Trump's vice president, who personally stood to gain by remaining in office, told Trump he'd seen no evidence of fraud. Okay, Mike Pence, big deal. Senior leaders of the DOJ appointed by Trump, responsible for investigating credible allegations, told him multiple times no fraud. Now again, this is turning into, this is reading like a reckless mindset, not a knowing mindset. The knowing mental state would say, yeah, I know it's false, but I'm doing it anyways. Yeah, I know that candy bar is not mine, but I'm taking it. This is though Trump had a belief other people are pounding him. Hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But he did it anyways, which would be closer to recklessness, but doesn't seem like knowing at all. The director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, disabused Trump of the notion of their findings about foreign interference. CISA, Chris Krebs, one of the least trustworthy people in this whole country, who is now trying to get people disbarred and out of the field because of what they did to support Trump. CISA, whose existence the defendant Trump signed into law, he created them, told him this was the most secure election in history. Days later, director announced publicly that experts were in agreement and Trump fired him. Chris Krebs should have been fired. That guy is very dishonest in my opinion. Senior White House attorneys selected by Trump to provide him candid advice informed the defendant that there was no evidence of election fraud and told him his presidency would end on Inauguration Day. So a bunch of lawyers told him differently. Well, but that's interesting though, because a bunch of other lawyers, as we saw up here, told him opposite. Okay, this was another lawyer who said, no, I mean, this is what we can do. Here's another Justice Department official. No, this is what we can do. Another lawyer and other political consultants. So we have a difference of opinion here. Jack Smith is just saying Trump needed to listen to these people because I like their opinion. But in the same indictment, he shows there's an alternative slate of opinions. Senior staffers on Trump's 2020 campaign, whose sole mission was his re-election, told him he had a 5% to 10% chance on winning the recount, meaning that he had lost the election. State legislatures, many of whom, okay, so 5 to 10%, that's great. He's got 5%. Sounds great. Yeah, he probably had 5% of beating Hillary Clinton, didn't he? Maybe less than that, and he did it. So who cares about this is all judgment stuff. This is like very pathetic of this indictment so far. They better beef this thing up. State legislatures and officials, many of whom were Trump's allies, also repeatedly informed him that his claims of fraud in their states were unsubstantiated. And state and federal courts, neutral arbiters responsible for ensuring even-handed, rejected many of his claims. Yeah. And we wake up today and we know now, the CIA was involved with Anthony Blinken and Peter Morell to create a fake narrative about Hunter Biden's laptop. So there was a fraud on America there. There was a fraud in the fact that the big tech companies were censoring us at the behest of the FBI. That was a fraud. There were frauds all over the place. Whether those were consequential at this moment in time is another thing. But Trump actually has some facts now to support him as well. None of that was presented to state and federal courts. Doesn't mean it didn't exist. And we had suspicions back then, and Trump had the belief in that now. And I think many Americans are starting to wake up and realize it too. So they say Trump widely disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months, getting more and more accurate, more and more right every month that goes by. They say again, despite the fact that he knew. I disagree. He was told, he was notified, he was advised. But did he know that in his mind? Did he believe that? In many cases, he had been informed directly that they were not true. They say Trump's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government and to obstruct the certification. He made these knowingly, again, there it is, false claims throughout post-election time, including those immediately before the attack. Trump insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. 4 days earlier, Georgia's Secretary of State said that was false. Trump asserted that there were 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania, but the acting attorney general said that was false. Trump said that there was a suspicious vote dump in Detroit, but they said there was no evidence of substantial fraud. Trump claimed that there were tens of thousands of double votes in Nevada, but they said no. no, facts versus myth. Trump said more than 30,000 non-citizens in Arizona. They said no evidence of substantial fraud. Okay, no evidence of substantial fraud. These are all opinions versus opinions. The defendant asserted that voting machines had switched the name, but a bunch of states said no. Okay, so now we've got a criminal agreement. Shortly after Election Day, which fell on November 3rd, Trump launched his criminal scheme. On November 13th, Trump campaign attorneys conceded in court that they had lost the vote in Arizona, meaning based on the assessment of their advisors, they say he lost. So the next day, Trump turned to co-conspirator number 1, whom he announced would spearhead his effort. So Trump changed his lawyers. Illegal. One lawyer says, I can't get you the outcome that you need. You go hire a different lawyer. Guess what? This happens every day in America. So he hires a different lawyer. From that part on, Trump and his co-conspirators now executed a strategy to use knowing deceit, or you would say legitimate election contestation methodologies in the targeted states to defeat the federal government, including as detailed below. They're going to walk us through all the states. Really? In Arizona, they say Trump had a conversation with his campaign manager who informed him that a claim had been circulating that non-citizens had voted. He said, Trump, that's false. But 8 days before the governor certified this, Trump and co-conspirator lawyer number 1 called the Speaker of the House, made false claims aimed at interfering with the vote. Trump and lawyer falsely asserted, among other things, that there were fraudulent votes. And we've covered some of this. This was Rusty Bowers. The Arizona House Speaker asked for evidence, and there wasn't any. Nothing happened. Trump and co-conspirator 1 held a hearing, but the Arizona House Speaker refused. And they also asked them to circumvent the process for the popular vote. And again, the House Speaker refused. So these are lawyers talking about, hey, is this something we can do? If you have the evidence, send me the evidence and we'll talk about it. They never sent him the evidence. On December 1, co-conspirator 1, Trump's lawyer, met with the Arizona House. When they asked again for evidence, he responded, we don't have the evidence, but we've got a lot of theories. Yeah, they're investigating it. It's December. Then the House Speaker issued a statement. He said, I will not change the outcome of a certified election. On the morning of January 4th, co-conspirator number 2, another Trump lawyer, called the House Speaker, urging him to decertify the state's electors. Arizona's validly ascertained electors had voted weeks earlier. The House Speaker said, no, there's no evidence of substantial fraud. The lawyer said, well, he conceded he didn't know enough about the facts on the ground, but nonetheless, he said, well, just decertify it and let the courts sort it out. Speaker refused, said he would not play with the oath he had taken. On January 6th, defendant publicly repeated the false claim that 36,000 non-citizens had voted. And I guess that's Trump knowing that it was fraudulent. I still don't see that connection. Georgia, same type of thing. On November 16th, the defendant and his executive assistant sent another lawyer and other documents, critical bullet points. Says, go all in on your suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania with the fraud claim. Set aside the entire election. They filed a lawsuit. They alleged massive election fraud. He did this. There it is. So Trump did this despite the fact that when he had discussed co-conspirators' far-fetched plans with private advisors, Trump had conceded that they were unsupported and that co-conspirator number 3 sounded crazy. So the Georgia lawsuit was dismissed. Okay, so Trump says that sounds crazy. That means that he knew the election had been lost? He just didn't like her idea on that. Again, it doesn't mean that he thinks the election was lost. He just says that one idea is crazy. Co-conspirator number 1 orchestrated a presentation. So another lawyer went to the Judiciary Committee in Georgia. During the presentation, an agent of Trump and co-conspirator 1 falsely claimed that more than 10,000 dead people voted. A senior advisor to Trump told Trump's chief of staff through text messages. He said to Trump's chief of staff, just an FYI, his team verified that the 10,000 dead people is not accurate. It was clarified at a hearing today. The actual number was 12 dead people. Another agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 played a misleading excerpt of a video, showed workers with suitcases, and another lawyer encouraged the legislatures to decertify based on the allegations of fraud. Now, Trump also posted a tweet amplifying false claims. Blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia, he said. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more on this. But Georgia's Secretary of State debunked this. He said, no, that 90-second video is showing fraud, watched entirely, just normal ballot processing. Here's a fact check. December 8th, defendant called the Attorney General, Brad Raffensperger from Georgia, to pressure him to support an election lawsuit. Another senior campaign advisor who spoke with Trump on a daily basis had informed him various fraud claims were untrue, and he said that co-conspirator 1 and his legal team's claims could not be substantiated. So it's lawyers disagreeing with other lawyers. Senior campaign advisor disagrees with Trump's lawyer. As early as mid-November, this advisor had informed Trump that large numbers of dead voters were untrue. Same thing with the State Farm Arena. He said, our research and legal team can't back up any of the claims. You can see why when it's just conspiracy stuff beamed down from the mothership. December 10th, 4 days before Biden's valid electors were scheduled to be cast in their vote, conspirator number 1 at a hearing before Georgia played the State Farm video again, saying this is just the tip of the iceberg. He said that this is them passing USB ports around like they're vials of heroin or cocaine. December 15th, they say Trump summoned the acting attorney general to discuss allegations of election fraud. They refuted his claims. They said that what conspirator number 1 was showing you was just benign. They say Trump also called and he spoke with the acting attorney general. He oppressed unfounded claims, and they say we don't have any suspicious conduct. So I think they're saying that Trump signed another document when he was suing the Georgia governor, that he's acknowledging that some of the claims that were brought against the Georgia governor weren't valid. But again, you see how that doesn't mean that he knew that the election was fraudulent? You can have crazy ideas and not be deviated from your underlying belief. On January 2nd, 4 days before Congress's certification proceeding, Trump and others called Brad Raffensperger, Georgia Secretary of State. During the call, they say Trump lied to the Secretary of State to induce him to alter the popular vote. He raised allegations about the State Farm Arena video, falsely referring to somebody as a professional vote scammer. He says, I think it's unfortunate that your lawyers sliced and diced that video. Trump claimed 5,000 people were dead. Trump claimed thousands of out-of-state voters had cast ballots in the election. In response to multiple other of defendants' allegations, Georgia Secretary of State told Trump that there was no merit. He said that we needed to find 11,780 votes and insinuated, what they say, is that the council could be subject to criminal prosecution if they don't find the vote. He said, and you are going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. On November 5th, they say there had been suspicious dump of votes of illegal ballots. Trump made a comment about it. On November 20th, 3 days before the governor signed a certification, Trump held a meeting in the Oval Office, brought some people in there. They told him, you lost Michigan not because of fraud, but because you underperformed. They told him that specifically. But on December 1st, defendant Trump raised his Michigan vote dump claim with the attorney general. He made knowingly false statements. He said at 6:31 in the morning, a vote of 150,000 votes was dumped. As Trump attempts to obstruct the vote, his co-conspirators developed a new plan. Marshal individuals where he won the popular vote in 7 states. Send the vice president false certifications that they were legitimate. Drafted by co-conspirator number 5. The memoranda evolved over time from a legal strategy to preserve Trump's rights, right, which I guess you're allowed to do, according to them, whatever that looks like, to now a corrupt plan to stop Biden's electors. Chairwoman of the RNC was involved. RNC consulted Trump's campaign and heard that work on gathering electors was underway. So the RNC's involved in this? When they were submitting the competing slates of electors to Mike Pence, there were some people who refused to do that. And there were some people who said, well, I want to add in a contingency language to this. All legitimate electors of all 50 states and DC met to cast their votes, 232 for Trump, 306 for Biden. They say Trump raised multiple false claims of election fraud when the AG told Trump that the DOJ could not and would not change the outcome. Trump said, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. Trump attempts to enlist Vice President Pence. As the J6 congressional certification approached, Trump sought to get Pence's help. He did this by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to convince Pence to reject the electoral votes. After cultivating widespread anger for weeks, he said, be there, we'll be wild on January 6th. Several private phone calls, Trump repeated knowing and false election claims and directly pressured Pence to use what they say was his ceremonial role. I don't think that now it is. Back then it wasn't. To fraudulently overturn the results. On December, Vice President Pence called Trump to wish him a Merry Christmas. He said, Trump, I don't think I have the authority to change the outcome. Pence wrote notes. He says, Trump falsely told VP Pence that the Justice Department was finding major infractions. Pence said, Trump told me that. On J1, Trump called VP Pence and berated him because he'd learned that Vice President Pence opposed a lawsuit seeking guidance. Apparently, Trump told Pence that you're too honest. Within hours of the conversation, he said there's going to be a big protest on J6. He told VP Pence that Pence had an absolute right to reject the electors. On January 5, Trump met alone with Pence. When VP refused to do anything, Trump got frustrated. He told the VP that Trump would have to publicly criticize him. And so VP got concerned about his safety and told his Secret Service. As crowds began to gather in Washington and they were audible, Trump remarked to his advisors that J6 was going to be, quote, angry. That night, Trump approved and caused the defendant Trump campaign to issue a public statement. From his meeting with Pence out only hours earlier, he said, the VP and I are in total agreement that the vice president has the power to act. On January 6, starting in the morning hours, Trump again turned to knowingly false statements aimed at VP Pence. Next, at 11:56, Trump made knowingly false statements that obstructed the federal government. He repeated the false claim of election fraud, gave false hope that vice president might change the election outcome, and directed the crowd to go into the Capitol as a means to obstruct. VP fraudulently obstructed the certification. He wanted to pressure him to do that, and he made false statements, including, he said, I hope Mike Pence is going to do the right thing. I hope so. We're supposed to protect our country. States want to revote. States got defrauded. They were given false information. That is absolutely true, by the way. All Vice President Pence has to do is send the states back, become president, and you're the happiest people. After extorting that we fight like hell, and if you don't fight, you're not going to have a country anymore, Trump directed people in front of him to head to the Capitol. He suggested he was was going with them. He told them to give members of Congress the kind of pride and boldness they need to take back our country. Before Trump had finished speaking, a crowd began to gather. Thereafter, a mass of people, including Ray Epps, including individuals who had traveled to Washington, broke through barriers. Trump had returned to the White House to conclude his remarks, watch the events unfold in a dining room next to the Oval Office. At 2:13, after more than an hour of steady, violent advancement, crowd broke into the Capitol. Upon news of receiving that the individuals had breached the Capitol, Trump's advisors told him a riot was there. When advisors urged Trump to issue a calming message, Trump refused, repeatedly remarking that people were angry because the election was stolen. At the Capitol throughout the afternoon, members of the crowd chanted, "Hang Mike Pence, where is Pence? Bring him out, traitor Pence." Trump repeatedly refused to approve a message directing rioters to leave the Capitol. Urged by most senior advisors, White House counsel, deputy White House counsel, chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, senior advisor. Is this illegal? At 4:17, Trump released a video message taped at the White House. He repeated the knowing false claim that we had an election that was stolen from us. We finally asked individuals to leave the Capitol. He said that they were very special and that we love you. On the evening of January 6th, Trump and Lawyer 1 attempted to exploit the violence at the Capitol, called lawmakers to convince them, based on this, to delay the certification. Trump and White House aides attempted to reach 2 state senators 6 p.m., 6:59 until 7:15, 18 p.m. Co-conspirator 1 called 5 senators, 1 representative. Co-conspirator 6 attempted to confirm the phone numbers of 6 senators, calling people to delay. In one of the calls, Lawyer 1 left a voicemail intended for a senator, says, "We need you, our Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislatures to get more information to you. I know they're reconvening at 8 tonight, but the only strategy we can follow is to object to numerous states, ideally until the end of tomorrow." So they're still making their arguments. And therefore, Trump and his co-conspirators committed the following crimes. Count 2, he conspired to obstruct and impede an official proceeding. Count 3, he aided and corruptly obstructed and impeded an official proceeding, the certification of the vote. Count 4, he conspired to threaten and intimidate one or more persons in the free exercise of a right or privilege. And that's it. This is the indictment from Jack Smith. Wow. Signed by Jack Smith, Special Counsel to the United States Department of Justice. This is a lot less than what I was even expecting. Now, I'm not sure that this is going to be the end of the story here. There are a lot of other co-conspirators, and it feels like there might be another superseding indictment situation here, but they're going through the various states, and you might disagree with Donald Trump's methodology or about his aggression or bravado or his tactics, certainly. Peter Strzok, they were celebrating this today, said, "Fine day for indictments." Says Trump's a given, but would totally hit one of the betting apps for parlays. Peter Strzok, of course, is a former FBI official, and so they're celebrating this, right? This is what they've been waiting for. And I remarked that this was very good evidence. This man is just indicative of who these people are. I said, these people are sick, man. Indictment gambling against their political enemies like this. It's just like this is some sort of a sporting event. I said Strzok is the embodiment of the mentality and why they're totally illegitimate. And guess what? He blocked me for saying exactly what's true. And so a lot of people are celebrating over this January 6th indictment, but as it stands right now, it feels quite weak. It's a bunch of conversations between Trump and his legal team with other people over a questionable matter.